Alright, so ever since I started reviewing movies, primarily Christian movies, and saying like none of these are funny, you guys have told me, look Kevin, you have got to check out a movie that will totally change your mind. And I was like, yeah, right. Went ahead, saw the movie, here's my review of Believe Me. Believe Me, what is this movie? Well, imagine if you had like a National Lampoon or American Pie or like Hangover, kind of trying to make a Christian movie. You kind of get this movie, except that this movie is not in the terms of like how funny it is. Let's get into the story. The main premise of this movie is that there is this guy, he is in college, and then he finds out that he's not gonna be able to keep going to college because he doesn't have enough money and his scholarship isn't going through, and he's like, oh my goodness, what am I gonna do? Turns out that Sunday he goes to church with his friend. This girl is up there and she's talking about how happy she is that she just raised a bunch of money for Africa. So he develops in his mind this scheme, and he ropes some of his friends in that they're going to do this big mission to help kids in Africa. They have this event and they raise this money, and basically from there it is the movie That Thing You Do. This guy kind of comes up and he's like this music producer type person. He then recruits them to go on kind of like a crusade, go on the road, but then they end up fighting. And you know the story, everything falls apart at the end and there's the liar reveal moment. Somehow it all works out in the end and everybody is happier because they've got it all out there in the open and everything's better now. So what's good about the movie? Well, it's pretty funny. I just reviewed the movie Shooting the Prodigal. This movie is much more cynical than that movie. Even though I believe that they are Christians, they're much more jaded towards the church, and so that comes across, and maybe that's just kind of the style of this type of movie. It's probably more like me now that I think about it. The funniest part in this movie is that there is a cameo from the Christian rapper Lecrae. It is quite funny. I'm not gonna give it away. It definitely made me laugh. While the movie is kind of cynical towards like Christian culture, I do like the fact that it's a Christian movie that's not afraid to be irreverent. It is PG-13, so there are actually words that make this movie PG-13. I was surprised, though I do wonder like, who's your movie for? Most of the jokes stem from Christian culture. So if you've been to like the Passion Conference or Hillsong Unite or some mega church or whatever, you have seen this type of thing, and so then you could enjoy it, and yet they say I don't know who this movie is for, and that's maybe why it didn't do super well. It was also very accurate in terms of like not just the funny parts of Christian culture, but also the very scary parts where you have somebody who has a successful ministry and is willing to lie because they don't want all that money to go away. Evil, terrible things are happening, but because a lot of money is in it, they're not going to take care of that problem. Another thing that I didn't really like is that it definitely had some boring parts. I'm like sitting there like, this is supposed to be a comedy, I'm bored, let's pick it up. It also wasn't extremely relatable for me. None of these guys were like likable people. They're all lying, cheating, just seemed very different than the way I would have gone about like the entire situation, and it is very different than the way I did go about the entire thing because I went to college and I did it in a very responsible and honest way. Each of the four boys that are in the movie were passable, like they worked, and probably if one of them were like a side character, then they would work great, but it felt like all of them were just side characters and there was no like real standout in the movie. There also was a love interest, and even though the movie really isn't about that, they skipped over it pretty quickly, it still was like, I do not believe these two are together or are interested in each other. Like she was just kind of like, oh, I'm not interested, and all of a sudden, oh, well, I guess we're interested in each other because that's kind of how the script goes. The movie doesn't focus a lot on that, but it just still was there, but it wasn't too, you know, out there. I don't know, it was like, what, you know, it was bleh, is what it was. In the end, I will say that for a Christian movie, normally I don't like to do this because I don't like to separate Christian as a separate genre. I like to hold Christian movies up to the same standard as other films, kind of is my tagline, but for this movie, I will do it, and I'll explain why. For a regular movie, just an average, everyday movie, I mean, I would give this like a 45% at most. It's really not bringing anything new to the table. Without the Christian aspects of it, I would, again, just go watch That Thing You Do. However, because it's very difficult to implement a Christian message within a modern day story in a very organic way. On top of that, trying to make it a comedy seems like an impossible task, and I feel like this movie did that. So for a Christian movie, I would have to give it an 80%. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Say Goodnight, Kevin. Did you see Believe Me? If you did, let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you liked what I had to say here today, or any other time, and you want to see me keep on keeping on, then you could give to my Patreon. There's a link down there. Two people who do that, Brendan Neely and Westminster Effects, two great people who support the show. Give them a thank you in the comments maybe. Maybe check out westminstereffects.com and see what they've got going on there. Might be surprised at how cool some of their guitar pedals are. All right, that's all I gotta say for today. I'll talk to you all next time. Thanks for watching. Good night.